15:00 за українським часом, 2 грудня 2022 року. Ми продовжуємо наше міжнародне науково-педагогічне стажування на тему «Нові напрямки та форми організації освітнього процесу в галузі музикознавства та культурології», організаторами якого виступають Куявський університет у місті Владславику, Одеська національна музична академія імені Нежданової та громадська організація «Спільнота музикознавців України у світовій культурі». Сьогодні у нас приймають естафету наші польські колеги, наші друзі. Всі музикознавці України вже добре знають пані Джоанну Скибу, яка вже втретє підтримує наш сьогоднішній захід. Пані Джоанна є провідним дослідником освіти дорослих, дистанційної освіти, і часто я підкреслюю на подібних заходах, що пані Джоанна почала досліджувати питання дистанційної освіти, коли взагалі ніхто в Україні не знав, що таке програма Zoom, і що взагалі можна дистанційно працювати, як ми сьогодні з вами через війну працюємо. Отже, я із задоволенням надаю слово пані Джоанні, яка виступить зі своєю лекцією на тему «Активна культура. Як розуміти та насолоджуватися культурою». Joanna, please speak.
Good afternoon on this Friday.
Joanna, ми не чуємо.
Yes. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Because today I'm using a different device. I'm using my iPad. So just nod your head or just write on the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Because as I said, I'm using not the computer today, but my iPad. So, okay. So we're going to talk about culture today. And culture is a very broad and very big topic. And I'm especially honored to talk to you, to many specialists in the field, professors, tutors, from the academies related to music, related to culture in Ukraine. And I can see some familiar faces already, so I know that we have met during the internships. And for today, I would like to combine 3 aspects. I would like to talk about culture in general. So what is culture? Can it promote individuals? Can it promote collectivism? Can culture influence business? And also, I would like to give you a short quiz in the middle of our meeting today. So I will have 10 questions to you, which will be related to cross-culture or multicultural. And then in the second part of the meeting, I would like to concentrate on more practical aspects, but always as we meet and talk, the practical aspects will be related to theory, because we are on the academic ground, so we always find the grounds of theory and of science. So in general, the first question is, why is culture important to us? And the French writer André Malraux stated, culture is the sum of all forms of art, of love and thought, which during the course of time enabled men to be less enslaved. So this means culture is like opening a window. When we are using culture, when we are attending culture, and we are maybe even creating it, we become part of the world, which is related to something higher, to something more significant. Culture is also the invisible bond that ties people together. It refers to the patterns of human behavior. Those patterns can be found not only in art, but also in literature, in language, and in our religion. And they all represent our culture. Those beliefs of culture manifest the meaning through our lifestyle. Our moral values represent culture, and the importance of culture lies in the close association with the ways of thinking, believing, and living. So I think these three areas interact. There are differences in culture, and they lead to diversity in the people from different parts of the world. Therefore, I also mentioned the multicultural or the cross-culture today. How we see things largely is affected by our judgment skills. So the notions that we have, what kind of closely linked with our culture, which sometimes we even don't realize them. In perceiving something as good or bad, judging situations, we go back even unintentionally to the culture that is imprinted in us. So our culture determines the structure of our thinking. It influences unwillingly and unintentionally, it influences our perceptions. And many people who believe and belong to the culture promoting individualism, this is like, I would say, American culture promotes individualism. They tend to look at the main aspects of the situation. And those of the culture that promotes collectivism, I think our two countries are closer to collectivism than individualism, but this is, you may not agree with that, but this is just a concept. So those people related to collectivism tend to consider minor details. So we are focusing on minor details in situations. So as I said, American culture is predominantly individualistic. And for example, Japanese culture is promoting collectivism. So I would say it's closer to our grounds. It encourages the parents to make choices for children. This is an example of how parenting is perceived in contrasting ways due to the differences in culture. So people from Eastern cultures, like ours and yours, I would say, we perceive success as collective effort. I don't know, maybe you disagree with this, but I think this has been based for many, many years in history. Culture also has a lot of influence on perception, and those perceptions drive and stimulate our behavior. So the culture we belong to has a direct impact on our behavior. Moreover, our environment, which has cultural influences, also shapes our behavior. In a society where boys are discouraged from crying, men think of it as an odd gesture. But if the values of a certain culture do not teach men to respect women, it will naturally reflect in their behavior. So behavioral communication etiquette is also part of culture. What our culture teaches us has effect on the way that we interact socially. So people from some cultures are found to be more open in communicating ideas and even talking to strangers and people they meet for the first time. And those people from conservative cultures, like for example, maybe, I don't know, Muslim religion, I would say they are more conservative than we are. They may not be so open and they may not be seen so open as we are. So the difference between ideologies that cultures have has evident influence on the social pattern and on the social behavior. I would also say that culture shapes our personality. So the group culture determines the behavioral norms for a group, and to be accepted as part of the group, we tend to follow what the group decides for us. And influenced by the norms or rules laid out by culture, we act in accordance to them, or we very often try to, even if we don't follow the rules because we don't agree with them, we try to pretend that we follow. So our culture defines the expectations from us. It is our attempt to fulfill the expectations, to shape our behavior and our personality. And it's our religion, traditions, our customs that are all part of culture, and they play a major role in shaping our personalities. The way we perceive a situation and the way we react to a situation depends largely to what we have learned from our environment around us and the way that we have been brought up, either at home or we have been brought up in the educational system. And these factors are linked to cultural values. And through our nature and education, we are developing our personalities, and culture has a dominant role to play in it. And people who are born and brought up in the same culture are often found to share certain and similar personality traits. What are some other effects that culture has on us? Certain beliefs about, for example, health and medical care are also part of culture. They may seem right now quite remote from the general topic, but they are very much related. So people from cultures that believe that physical and mental illnesses are very scientific phenomena, and those people will be open to discussing the symptoms with the doctors and getting the right treatment. And those people who believe that the illnesses are a curse of God may not be so open to accept medical treatment that they are offered. I would not like to go into details because it's a very fragile topic to talk about the religious point of view on and its influence on medical situations, but this is just a general concept and situation. So this social acceptance of diseases is also influenced by culture. We may be different in our attitudes towards illnesses, and we may have different attitudes towards the medical care. And people from certain social groups prefer some different relationship they may have with the doctors. Some people would like to have an authoritarian relationship with the medical professionals. And others think that they want to be friends with the medical professionals in order to get better treatment or maybe better medical solutions for the problems. In assessing a patient's individual care, medical professionals also need what are the cultural beliefs of the patient. So this cultural background influences factors like the kind of family support they get and the health decisions that will be made and the way they will cope with this illness. There are some countries, I've been told by some of my friends when I was traveling abroad, that the patient is usually, I think it was about Turkey, that the patient is accompanied by his or her family most of the time while he or she is in hospital, and the family supports this person, of course, when it is possible. But this is just the Turkish attitude, is like the family members are all together. So I think it depends on the country, on the situation. Now jumping into business relations, because I'm sort of showing the different areas where culture has influence on us. Can culture influence business? I would say yes, to a very large extent. During business communication with people from different culture, there are beliefs and manners that have to be taken into account. There may be some language barriers that need to be overcome. Cultural differences impact also the success or failure of business negotiations. I think you have heard many situations and stories when there was complete misunderstanding based on different types and patterns of behavior and communication. So in business life, for the certain target group, companies need to study the cultural values of the group. And the tastes and preferences of the group may be influenced by culture that the group represents or origins from. And there are many advertising strategies which are used for, let's say, American audience, and those strategies will never go for the Asian market. Or sometimes there may be business situations which need to consider cultural differences from product design, from product name, because the product name may also have a lot of influence on how it may sell on the given market. You may also be familiar with stories when the product was, especially with the names of cars, the models, the makes of cars, and when sometimes there is a wording or a phrase in a given language which translates to something which is funny or even not funny but offensive in the language. And for example, well, I don't remember specific examples now, but there were many situations described when the word referred to something which had a bad image in the target country. So the product, a car or a watch, did not sell totally because of the bad communication and bad association. So this shows that the processes of culture are global. And when we go to the global market, we have to consider this culture, that culture which may be having impact on business as well. How culture realizes the differences. So it is not only in health, it is not only in business, but I think it's in every sphere of our lives, that it is important that there are differences in culture, that it has influence on us. Therefore, I called the today's session active culture, because this means that culture is everywhere in every aspect of our lives. And it is due to the migration of many people across countries, as we live in the multicultural society. As we know, the situation now has changed quite a lot, especially for us, for you, Ukrainians, and us, Polish people, as there are many Ukrainian people in Poland now. And this has also changed our lives a lot. If you go to a supermarket in Poland, you will see signs in Ukrainian language. You will see shows in theater. There are special shows, especially for children, which are given in Ukrainian, especially in bigger cities. When I go to Warsaw, like about once a month, I go there usually on business. I always see that it's like the city gets more, foreigner friendly, but it's especially for the children from your country. So it's like the schools, in theaters, in cinemas. So we have adopted it. It's like becoming more multicultural in a way. And we have to accept everything. We have to accept the people around us. Whether we want it or not, we socialize with many people in our office work. We socialize on the grounds that we make with our friends. And people come from many parts of the world and many different countries. That's what I experience in my job every day, because being the head of the international office gives me many opportunities, but also many challenges. When I talk to some people who have a very different attitude or very different notions and concepts of thinking, living, and values and beliefs. So the knowledge of our culture is important, but I would say it's even more important to have the practical knowledge about other cultures, which helps to accept situations and the differences, because we are all different. And even thinking about Poland, the country of 38 million inhabitants, it is divided into sub-countries. I would say provinces, you know what I mean. And though the provinces may also be different from one another. So this view on culture is very broad. This is a very big notion, and there is no one single concept on that. What does really culture give us? It gives this identity. This also gives the character. It's very much related to our national symbols and national history, the cultural values which are shared in the community and social groups give us the sense of belonging. Culture unites people and gives the security. It's also true about the language that we speak, the art, the literature, and the heritage. We are proud of it, and we are proud of our food, our festivals, our customs and traditions, and they go from generation to generation. And they all become part of our daily living, and they influence us in many, many special ways. And the importance of culture cannot be stressed enough. It is something that lies within us. It is around us, and this is the integral part of our lives. Thinking about the elements of culture. So what is really culture made of? Because I introduced some notions of theory. But what is really culture? What are the elements of it? I have some concepts for you. I think it's ethnicity, so the national origin. It's the language, religion and spiritual beliefs, gender, the socio-economic class, age, sexual orientation, geographic origin, group history, education, upbringing, and life experience. These all are elements that create culture. And how can we define culture in terms of attributing general adjectives to it? Culture is dynamic and evolving, which means it is changing and fluctuating. Culture is learned and passed on through generations. Culture is shared among those who agree on the way that they name and understand the reality in the common way. It is often identified symbolically through language, music, and our behaviors. And it is integrated into all aspects of all individuals' lives, which means that it may be very symbolic, it may be underlying every aspect of our everyday behavior. Culture is commonly divided into two broad categories, and they are categories which lie at opposite ends. One is collectivistic culture and individualistic culture. I mentioned it at the beginning. So most cultures fall somewhere in between, and they have characteristics of both notions. And what are the differences between the two? In the collectivistic culture, there is the main focus on we, promote the relatedness and interdependence. We have the connection, very strong connection to the family, and we also value respect and obedience. We emphasize the group goals, cooperation, and harmony. So this shows that we put we in front. In individualistic cultures, there is the focus on I. There is the biggest value on autonomy. There is the view of ability to make personal choices, individual decisions. And there is a strong emphasis on individual initiative and individual achievement. There is a smaller influence on the group views and values and fewer aspects of life. So I can say that the I goes before we in the individualistic cultures. Culture is a mixture. It's a mixture of values, meanings, conventions, and they all constitute our daily realities. As a system of meaning and shared beliefs, culture provides a framework for our behavior and for our norms. There are countless studies on cultural psychology. They have examined the effect of culture on all aspects of our behavior, on cognition, emotion, and the differences and similarities across the populations. And more recently, there are findings in cultural neuroscience, and it has outlined the possible ways that culture scripts that we have learned during childhood and cultural practices as adults influence our brains. So this means that we have imprinted patterns which influence our behavior as a consumer of culture. For example, today, this is just a real life story from the meeting with my colleague in the university office. We were having a discussion on some business meeting, and I saw a big poster in his office room with the Beatles, the British pop group. And there was the Beatles song to be heard in the background of the meeting. And I said, okay, the Beatles are everywhere on the wall and the music is on. So is it your favorite group? And he said, yes. This group is in a way imprinted into me, and it has been imprinted by my mother when she was expecting me, when she was pregnant with me. Because it was like about 50 years ago, and the group was at the peak of popularity then. And his mother listened to the Beatles when he was expecting my colleague. And he said, okay, this is the neuroscientific example, that he is a neuroscientific example, that he has been imprinted this music. And he is now obsessed with it, although he's now like 52 years old. And he said he listens to this music every day. And it is also true about the language learning, because there is one theory of language acquisition that if it is imprinted into us when we are in the phase of unborn but expected babies, we are getting this vibe or getting the skill of speaking a certain language. Can culture wire and connect our brains? I think yes, very much so, that it can have influence on our brains. There are many scientific findings, scientific researches related to cultural neuroscience, that there is the mechanism related to the brain's plasticity and flexibility. So when the brain has this ability to adapt to long-lasting engagement, like in cultural tasks, it can show the capacity to undergo many structural changes, and they reoccur day by day. They influence our memory, they influence the hippocamp, and they increase the cortical density in the motor cortex. So it has a lot of influence on our brain, and it also shows that there is the connection and wiring in the brain and culture. In order to process various cultural functions with more fluency, culture appears to become ingrained from the accumulated cultural experiences in our brain. So there are numerous studies which have shown how cultural background can influence the neural activity during some cognitive functions. For example, the cross-cultural differences in brain activity among Western and Asian participants revealed that during the tasks, there are different perception, attention, processing situations going on. So it reflects that it's also different from nation to nation. Culture appears to influence the way that we are presented or represented in our brains. There was one famous experiment between the Western and Chinese participants, and they were asked to think about themselves. They were asked to think about their mothers. So the data collected from the same parts of the brain showed that the areas which were activated in Chinese participants, the areas when they thought about themselves were the same as they thought about their mothers. And it was different in the case of Western participants. So these results were interpreted, and they suggested that the Chinese participants use the same brain area to think about the self and the mothers, while Western participants use the different part of the brain exclusively for self-representation. So I would say that only culture can have such a strong influence on us. And the recent cultural neuroscience research showing some and shedding some light on how culture shapes the functional anatomy, and it affects the neural activity, influences the way we represent the self and others in our brains. Whether due to daily activities or our genes, the neurons fire repeatedly in scripted ways for a prolonged time, and they facilitate cultural adaptation. The question is how culture can influence behavior. I think that to a very big extent, it can influence our behavior unintentionally every day, and it impacts our lives and our school setting, our judgments, and many different situations. Now I have a quiz for you. If you are ready, you can answer in the chat box. If not, you can just answer to yourselves, just to introduce some lighter element. This is about the cross-culture. I'm going to read some, and the answer, there are two answers, true or false. The first question, it is usual to shake hands for the first time when you meet a British colleague. Is it true or false? What do you think? The British people shake hands on the first meeting. The correct answer is it's true. The next one, it is not a good idea to call German colleagues by their first names at work. What do you think? Do you know? It's false. You can do that. The next question. When a Japanese business person gives his or her business card, it is polite to say thank you and put it in your pocket. Is it okay or not? It's false. Because you should not put it in your pocket. You should read it with interest. So it's ignoring somebody when you just put it away. The next one. In the Mediterranean countries, embrace colleagues. It means hold them, yeah? When you meet them in Mediterranean countries. Well, the answer is false, because maybe with friends, yes. Yes, somebody answered it. Because it may be true in situations when we are closer. The next one is about Poland. Take off your shoes when you visit somebody's house in Poland. Take off your shoes. Do you know? We do that? It's true. Yes, it's true. It's a it's a tradition. It's a custom. Some people laugh at that now because they say it's old-fashioned, that we shouldn't do that. For example, imagine a situation when there is a party and somebody's home, you are wearing a nice dress and very nice shoes, and you go there and you take off your shoes. Well, but really the shoes are part of your outfit. And well, this is seen as true, but in many houses now people don't obey that. In Saudi Arabia, it is rude to refuse a cup of tea. I think in general, in many Muslim countries, it is rude to refuse a cup of tea. It's true, you should refuse a cup of tea when you're offered it. The next one, in Great Britain, ask about your host family when you meet for the first time. You can ask the details about the host family in Great Britain. Yes, you shouldn't do that because it's seen as personal question. In Asia, it is rude to look people directly in the eyes, true or false? It's true. In Asia, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. When you look directly, it is considered offensive in many ways. British people like to talk about how much money they earn. British people like to talk about how much, no, they don't. They are very reserved. They don't show off, yes, with that. And also about Poland, when you visit Poland and you arrive by plane, your host will greet you at the airport with the flowers. Well, it depends on the situation. If it's a formal meeting, maybe yes. In general, most people would say yes, it is true, because it is not really a strong custom, but it is a situation that may be happening. When you arrive in Poland, usually by plane at the airport, the host may give you flowers, but well, as you know, with culture, many things and situations are changing, and it's not very obvious. But well, this short quiz may only show you how different we are, what very different attitudes that we have, and sometimes it's very easy to make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes may have horrible consequences. There are many stories in diplomacy when there are language mistakes or mistakes in somebody's behavior, and they are very often unexpected or unintentional. And they may lead to some horrible consequences of misunderstanding. Of course, it depends on the level that they are happening, but if they are at higher levels, then the consequences may be strong. I remember some 10 years ago, there was an official visit of the Japanese Prime Minister to Poland, and Polish Prime Minister was accompanied by his wife, who had a very fancy dress, which was like, it had Japanese letters on it, but it was like a dress you could wear at a garden party, but not at the very official meeting. And there were some Chinese letters on this dress. And it was like the biggest conflict, I think, between Poland and Japan was because of this dress that the Prime Minister's wife was wearing at the first official meeting between the heads, representatives of the state. So you have to be very careful, especially with the language symbols, and you have to be very careful on the notion that they carry. Also, another example of accepting is the tattoo. In some jobs, the tattoo will never be accepted. My daughter was applying to become an air hostess this summer to 2 or 3 airlines. She has a small tattoo. She has a small tattoo on her hand, on her wrist. And this is just, it's a musical note, in fact, because she plays the guitar and she has it just here. And she was interviewed by three airplane companies in Warsaw this summer, but she was rejected just because of the small tattoo, because the company said that although this is just a musical note, which is seems harmless because it's not a word, it's not a picture or anything, it may be offensive in some cultures because people who travel by plane want to be serviced by attendants who are neutral, who don't represent any religion or don't represent any opinion, and they want to be served by somebody who is indifferent. And my daughter was really sorry when it happened, but we couldn't do anything. It was just, we had to accept it, that when you have a tattoo in visible place, you cannot become an air hostess for any company, because it may have an underlying meaning which you may not be aware of. This was the same with the dress that our Prime Minister's wife was wearing at this unfortunate meeting, because sometimes we do not know what the meaning of a situation may be. I think this all adds more value to culture and many concepts of culture. That there are values and benefits that we have as people. There are many beautiful and delightful experiences that we have. Culture provides us with emotional situations and feelings. It shows that people are very creative. It influences our behaviors, our well-being, even our health. So it has influence on people massively. This is like the society's blood, we may say. This is what culture really is. And there are many perceptions on culture that we feel that are important, and they all have identity for the group of people. And with this importance of culture, we cannot overlook this influence on our behavior as well. There are several important components of culture. Culture is learnable, so we can learn it. It can have different values. It can be different, but we may be able to focus on it in a different way, and also we may be able to learn it. There are learned behaviors which come in different ways. They may be overt and covered behaviors. So overt behaviors are those which we display outside, and covered are those which we do not really show. Another aspect of culture is that it is abstract. Culture is something very often that we cannot see or cannot touch. So it's abstract, but definitely it exists in our minds, in our brains, our habits. It affects our way of thinking and the way our behavior. Culture may be designed. Culture may be something which can have patterns that can be repeated. The culture is also the outcome of our behavior. So cultural knowledge is very individual. It begins at the level when we learn as toddlers, as children, and it can be passed on from generation to generation. But we must remember that culture is dynamic, that it changes and it is progressive. What are the types of culture? There is material culture, so the things we can actually see and touch. There is a lot of non-material culture. It's like the history, it's like traditions, it's like music, the norms, the languages and symbols. And there are many values related to it, and there are many beliefs which are related to culture. It is important that we have cultural planning in many, many countries when the community resources allow this. And for example, in Polish cities, our municipalities plan culture. Like they plan events, they plan investments, the investments allow to organize many festivals. For example, music festivals, or they may also help to start new projects like opening museums. So culture, I think it's a big question. Can culture be planned? I think yes, it can be planned. Sometimes it has to be planned. I am part of many, and I've been working in many European projects where culture is really subsidized by the European Union funds. And many cultural events are very successful because money helps culture. I think we need to agree to this. Culture is usually very expensive. Going to the cinema, going to concerts costs quite a lot of money. So it has to be, if it can be, it has to be subsidized. I would say, as a conclusion of our meeting, that culture is the building block, the blood of every society. And people who are in this culture are the results of culture. So it influences behavior, it has influence on our patterns, it has influence on our attitudes and on our lives in general. So the title of the meeting was Active Culture. So we are all in this culture every day, sometimes unintentionally, whether we want it or not. But we need to remember that it has a very strong and very often unintentional, unwanted, even if we want it or not, it has a lot of influence on our lives and our attitudes. Thank you very much for today. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Щиро дякуємо, пані Джоанно, за дуже змістовну та цікаву лекцію. Надзвичайно приємно було почути досвід наших співгромадян, які зараз перебувають в країні в Польщі, і що ви так посилено, щоденно допомагаєте Польщі і підтримуєте нас у цей складний час. Щиро усім дякуємо і нагадуємо, що наступного разу ми зустрічаємося через тиждень, 9 грудня. До побачення. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.